An attempt at intimidation at a local farmer's market turned into a legend that would change hundreds of lives, making it the most remarkable story in Ironwood Bluff's history. The Crimson Reapers motorcycle gang didn't realize they were up against one of the most illustrious Texas Rangers in state history, Samuel Hunter, when they targeted what they believed to be a peaceful elderly farmer. Hunter, who had over 300 successful operations under his belt and a reputation that made even the most seasoned criminals put down their guns, had exchanged his badge for a quiet life caring for his wheat fields. But the abilities he had spent decades honing would be put to the test one final time on that fateful July morning. What began as a violent altercation would turn into something no one could have predicted, a tale of redemption that turned a notorious motorcycle gang into defenders of the exact neighborhood they had once ravaged. Tell us where you're tuning in from before we resume. Make sure to subscribe if this tale resonates with you, as I have something extra special in store for you tomorrow. The golden stalks of wheat swayed gently in the warm Texas breeze as the early sun cast long shadows across Samuel Hunter's fields. Samuel was 70 years old, but he moved with an elegance that belied his age, his grizzled hands carefully inspecting each irrigation line. Both the labor gloves in his back pocket and the holstered Colt Peacemaker at his hip, which he had learned over the course of a lifetime, seemed to fit in perfectly. "Samuel," Nora Harper said as she made her way down the dirt lane that connected their homes, "those wheat stalks won't grow any faster with you staring at them like that." The morning air was filled with the enticing perfume of her basket of freshly baked biscuits. Slowly, Samuel straightened, his eyes involuntarily searching the horizon, a habit he had never been able to overcome in his previous life. "I'm going to be spoiled by your biscuits, Nora Harper." Nora put her basket on a nearby fence post and said, "Someone has to take care of you. If I let you rot out here, Catherine would never forgive me." Samuel's face softly lit up when his late wife was mentioned. "Your biscuits were the best in 3 counties, she would often declare. A far-off rumble of motorcycles reverberated over the valley as they performed their morning ritual together. Nora's fists gripped her apron as her face tensed. "For the 3rd time this week, they're back." Samuel remained composed and kept eating his biscuit. "Jim Parker informed me that they shattered his hand after he refused to give them free items when they arrived at his fruit stand yesterday. For 4 generations, his family has been selling at that market." Anger and despair were mixed together in Nora's voice. "According to Sheriff Langston, they have also been causing problems in Copper Canyon under the fictitious name of the Crimson Reapers." Samuel moved slowly and deliberately as he dusted the crumbs from his shirt. "I've been meaning to sell some of that excess wheat flour anyhow, so it could be time for me to visit the market myself." There was relief in her eyes, "But Samuel Hunter, don't you go look for Nora." Though few were aware of Samuel's full potential, everyone in Ironwood Bluff was aware of his reputation for problem-solving. As the motorcyclists sped by on the far highway, the rumbling intensified and then subsided. With his seasoned eyes spotting new tire marks on the route to town, Samuel assisted Nora in gathering her belongings. "Nora, you'd better go home since I have some preparations to make and the market opens in an hour." Samuel walked into his barn, past the farming equipment to a locked cabinet at the rear, as Nora's figure vanished down the trail. 2 immaculately kept revolvers were kept within a battered leather pistol belt. It was the specialized weapons that had earned him his legendary standing among the Rangers, not the plain peacemaker he wore for show. He checked each weapon with practiced efficiency, murmuring, "Never thought I'd be needing these again." In his hands, the weight was like a familiar greeting from an old friend. Samuel had time to reflect on the way into town. He had learned to consider all sides of a subject from his 25 years in the Rangers. Their trend of increasing violence implied organization and purpose, proving that the Crimson Reapers were more than simply ordinary gang. They put pressure on important community people, targeted particular businesses, and were now enlarging their domain. Since the town's inception, Ironwood Bluff has had a farmer's market in the town center every Saturday. Samuel saw a number of vacant spaces where typical vendors ought to have been while he parked his vintage pickup truck. Jim Parker's Custonora spot was empty, serving as a sharp reminder of the bloodshed from yesterday. "Good morning, Samuel." Sheriff Langston came over holding a coffee cup. A long night was implied by the younger man's weary eyes. "I didn't think you would be here today," Samuel said. "Thought I'd sell some flour," as he unloaded several sacks onto his plain wooden platform. "I heard you might be struggling." The sheriff looked around the market, which was filling slowly. Unlike the typical troublemakers, these Crimson Reapers are virtually professional. They began in Copper Canyon and are currently traveling in this direction. They have already received protection money from 15 businesses. Samuel carefully and precisely positioned his items, planning each step to provide him with a clear view of every market entrance. "Isn't 15 businesses too much, David?" The area was filled with the characteristic rumble of powerful motorcycles before the sheriff could react. 5 motorcyclists, their motorcycles shining in the morning sun, reached the market area, and conversations died down. With well-honed ease, their leader, a towering, scarred man wearing a jacket with the name Rattler on it, dismounted. Rattler's words reverberated across the abruptly silent marketplace. "It appears that we will be meeting some new merchants." His lips curled into what appeared to be a smile as his gaze fell onto Samuel's plain stand. "Come on, boys, let's introduce ourselves." Samuel proceeded to organize his flour bags, moving slowly yet accurately. His stance would have been obvious to anyone who knew what to look for, years of fighting training. But to these motorcycle riders, he was simply another elderly farmer who was going to get a hard lesson about Ironwood Bluff's new system. They were unaware that they would soon have to face some difficult lessons of their own. The Crimson Reapers, their boots scuffing the weathered pavement of the market, moved deliberately slowly towards Samuel's stand. As his 4 companions fanned out in a rehearsed configuration, Rattler grabbed up one of Samuel's wheat bags and weighed it in his hands, his scarred face contorting into a predatory smile. Samuel gave Sheriff Langston a small shake of his head to get his attention before he could move on. Years of small-town instinct told the sheriff to follow the old farmer's advice, but he hesitated. "You have a good setup here, old-timer." Rattler's voice was just menacing enough to make the vendors around him stop talking. If something happened to it, that would be a shame. His leather gloves were covered in white powder as he pressed the flour bag till it burst. Samuel moved slowly as he continued to arrange the rest of his baggage. "Son, that's $15 for the flour you just threw out." Vulture, Axel, Ghost, and a younger rider Samuel didn't recognize all laughed ominously. Rattler's grin disappeared, replaced by the icy gaze that had previously frightened innumerable victims. "You don't seem to comprehend how things operate around here these days." Rattler placed both hands on Samuel's wooden stand and leaned forward. "You pay us to give protection. Otherwise, mishaps occur." At last, Samuel raised his head and met Rattler's eyes with serene focus. "The only coincidence I can think of is that you thought I might be interested in your services." Just then, Deputy Emily Mitchell showed up, her police cruiser approaching the edge of the market. Quickly assessing the situation, she walked up with her weapon close at reach. "Is everything okay, Mr. Hunter?" With a professional yet worried tone, she called out. "Deputy, it's just a business conversation." Rattler brushed flour from his gloves and stood up straight. "Nothing that would worry the police." Samuel started carefully mopping up the flour that had spilled. "Could you please include in your report, Deputy Mitchell, that this individual owes me $15 for damaged goods?" Rattler's expression grew gloomy. When he reached for another flour bag, Samuel's hand unexpectedly sprang out and caught his wrist in a firm hold. Few others noticed the movement until Rattler attempted to pull away but was unable to do so since it was so controlled and fluid. "That's a day's worth of wasted flour." Samuel's tone caused 2 of the bikers to back off, even though his voice remained conversational. "I advise you to go on after making amends." The tallest of the gang, Vulture, reached into his jacket. "Old man, let him go, or..." Vulture, who was now sitting on the wooden stand between two wheat bags, was suddenly staring at his own knife when Samuel's other hand moved. He was never able to see how it arrived. Samuel kept taking Rattler's wrist off as I was speaking. $15 seems reasonable. There was utter silence in the market. Although Deputy Mitchell's hand was still close to her firearm, her face was more interested than worried. It was the fastest she had ever seen somebody move. Hatred blazing in Rattler's eyes, he rubbed his wrist. As if nothing had happened, Samuel really started bagging a customer's item. "You have no idea what you just started, old man. I am fully aware of my actions. Always had. Should I add that flour to your bill, or are you already paying for it?" Dr. Alice Martinez moved forward after seeing from her herb stand nearby. "Samuel, I'll cover the flour. Think of it as payment for the veggies you provided me with the previous week." "Thank you, Alice." Samuel nodded. "However, I doubt that these gentlemen are able to pay for their own harm." Rattler slammed a $20 dollar into the stand after taking it out. "Farmer, keep the change. Your hospital expenses will require it." Axel paused, watching Samuel with a bewildered look as the Crimson Reapers got on their bikes. The former military man recognized something in the old farmer's moves. Rattler's piercing whistle, however, called him back before he could put it. A cloud of dust and stress followed the bikers as they thundered off. Sheriff Langston walked over to Samuel's stand and shook his head in wonder. "Would you mind explaining to me how you do that without taking a single blow?" "Experience," Samuel said plainly, carrying on serving the clients who were now carefully making their way back to his stand. "Some battles are won before they ever begin." Dr. Martinez remained to assist with the cleanup of the leftover flour. "Samuel, Catherine used to say that you were always surprising people. However, I believe there is more to this narrative than you are revealing." Nora Harper, who had come during the altercation and placed her basket of biscuits on Samuel's stand, is always by his side. "Do you recall last year's attempt by those cattle rustlers to target Henderson? They just so happened to turn themselves in the following day, and Samuel just so happened to be there." Deputy Mitchell looked up curiously as she took notes on her report pad. "I recall the case. They were crying over something, like a ghost ranger. Not much else to say." Samuel packed the purchase of another customer. "Guilty brains can be tricked by imagination, Deputy." However, rumors were already circulating in the marketplace. Vendors murmured at Samuel's very rapid movements. He disarmed Vulture in a way that no one could see. The serene assurance that had defeated 5 seasoned motorcyclists. Dr. Martinez kept a careful eye on Samuel. Having been Catherine's closest friend, she had observed certain aspects of the reserved farmer that didn't quite add together throughout the years. "You know those men will return." Softly, Samuel answered, counting on it. His eyes scanned the market's exits with tactical judgment rather than terror. "Some people require multiple lessons." Sheriff Langston let out a deep sigh. "Samuel, I'll step up patrols around your farm. People in Copper Canyon have suffered because of these Crimson Reapers. Not all of them are bullies. They have a plan. Risky." Samuel replied softly, so that only the sheriff could hear, "So was I, David. It took us a long time to prepare and tell this narrative. Please subscribe to our channel if you find it entertaining. It is really important to us. Let's return to the narrative." More people visited Samuel's stand as the market started to close for the day. To share their knowledge of the Crimson Reapers, not to purchase flour. Photographs of the gang's activities at Copper Canyon were brought by Jim Parker's sister. Hardware store employee Frank Turner reported strange deliveries at an abandoned warehouse at night. As Samuel formed an image of his situation, each piece of knowledge was met by silent nods. Deputy Mitchell stopped at his stand to make one last shot. "In case you require assistance, Mr. Hunter." "Deputy, thank you." As he loaded his vehicle with unsold flour, Samuel grinned. The true question, though, I believe, is whether the Crimson Reapers will require assistance following what happens next. The wheat fields were covered in lengthy shadows as the sun sank and Samuel drove home. He was aware that his tranquil life was going to change. He could see dust clouds in his rearview mirror as bikers passed on far-off highways. Watching, scouts report back to Rattler. He considered letting them observe. Allow them to arrive. For some guys, strength is all that matters, but true strength isn't always what they anticipate. Knowing precisely how far to go and, more crucially, when to stop, can be difficult at times. His ability to deal with the Crimson Reapers wasn't going to be the true test. Whether he could succeed without turning into what he had spent years striving to avoid would be the test. As more Crimson Reapers arrived from Copper Canyon, the rumble of motorcycles reverberated from the abandoned warehouse at the edge of Ironwood Bluff. 15 more motorcyclists joined the original 5, and Rattler walked across the oil-stained concrete floor, his boots making tracks in the dust. He was simmering after the humiliation at the market, his scarred face contorted with barely restrained anger. He growled at Vulture, who stood awkwardly in front of the assembled riders. Tell them what happened. Tell them how we were made fun of by an elderly farmer. Leaning on his bike, Axel's military-trained eyes analyzed the dynamics of the gathering. He couldn't get the farmer's actions out of his head. The accuracy. Motion economy. The tactical awareness. Though not in civilians, he had witnessed it previously. Axel spoke forward, his voice heavy with battle experience. Boss. There's something wrong with this farmer. His movements. His awareness of the issue. It's advanced training. Are you claiming that an elderly man frightens you? Axel refused to back down, but Rattler turned against him. I'm arguing that we ought to be aware of what we're getting into. I was in Iraq for 2 tours. The posture of that individual. His authority. That's training at the special operations level. Ghost, who had been silently watching, gave a nod of assent. He knew exactly where we were all standing. He followed all subsidiary moves, but he never took his eyes off the main menace. That isn't training for farmers. As the ramifications were clear, the warehouse became quiet. A young man named Stryker, one of the recently arrived motorcyclists, raised his voice from the rear. What if Johnson is similar to him in Mesa County? How did Mesa County fare? Vulture inquired. A former Marine Force recon became a rancher. Last year, the Santos gang attempted to push him around. The Stryker hesitated. Parts of their bikes are still being discovered in the canyon. Tools flew as Rattler slammed his fist against a neighboring table. Even if he is God's gift of violence, I don't care. The Crimson Reapers are treated with no disrespect. No one. He looked around at the gathered crowd. Bring everyone together. Tonight, I want 30 bikes to strike that farm. Against such odds, we'll see how exceptional his training is. Nora's 16-year-old grandson, Tommy Harper, was hiding behind a pile of crates next to the smashed window of the warehouse. Curiosity had led him to follow the Crimson Reapers, but what he was hearing chilled him to the bone. He started to carefully retreat from his hiding place. A loose gravel fragment crunched beneath his foot. Examine the perimeter. The warehouse echoed with Vulture's voice. Behind him, motorbike engines erupted to life as Tommy sprinted, his pulse racing. Bikes were quicker than feet, but he was familiar with these back roads. As he passed across old Mr. Henderson's field, headlights pierced the encroaching dusk and closed in on him. He was about to give up when a well-known pickup truck pulled up on a side street. The door to the passenger side flew open. Samuel's voice said, "Get in." In a flawless defensive driving technique, Samuel threw up a cloud of dust that masked their pursuers, and Tommy leaped into the truck. Tommy saw the irate bikers come up short in the rearview mirror. How did you find out? Tommy's heart continued to race as he gulped. You had been acting strangely during supper, according to your grandmother, who called. Despite his placid demeanor, Samuel's eyes were constantly scanning the mirrors. Tommy, that was courageous. Brave, yet stupid. Tommy yelled out, "They're coming tonight, all of them, at least 30 bikes. They will burn down your farm, Mr. Hunter." Samuel gave an unsurprised nod. "I understand, which is why I need your assistance in getting everyone to safety." Preparations were already underway back at Samuel's property. He had devoted the afternoon to arranging machinery and modifying irrigation systems in seemingly arbitrary but tactically sound ways. As they pulled up, Nora's voice could be heard over the yard, "Samuel Hunter. How come my grandson is involved in all of this?" Samuel helped Tommy out of the truck, responding with more bravery than common judgment. However, he provided us with useful information. Nora's automobile was parked next to Dr. Martinez's, and the patrol car driven by Sheriff Langston drew up behind them. With his medical bag in hand, the doctor came out of the home. She firmly stated, "Don't try to talk me out of being here. If I abandoned you to deal with this on your own, Catherine would never forgive me." When Sheriff Langston arrived at Deputy Mitchell's side, Henderson called to report that someone was being pursued by bicycles across his field. "I suppose that clarifies Tommy's nighttime escapade." Samuel led the group inside and told them they were getting stronger. "Maybe 30 riders. They will arrive quickly and forcefully, attempting to overwhelm with data. Deputy Mitchell advised me to call in the county for support. In an hour, we can have tactical teams here." Spreading a hand-drawn map of his property on the kitchen table, Samuel responded, "An hour's too long. And tonight is when this must end. These folks have endured enough fear. What are you going to do?" Sheriff Langston looked at the map and asked. "A straight fight is what they anticipate. Rather, they will learn a lesson." Samuel started annotating the map with positions. "I need you and Emily to work with Pastor Brown and Frank. Turner, David. Bring everyone to the basement of the church. They must first secure everyone they might target for retaliation. Dr. Martinez insisted that you fight 30 armed bikers by yourself." "Not by myself," Samuel said, looking at his watch. "And avoid confronting them directly. Allowing your opponent to beat himself is sometimes the finest strategy for winning a battle." Nora held back as the gang scattered to their designated jobs. "I recognize that look, Samuel. I saw it when you were hunting the Carson gang 25 years ago. Just make me a promise. Recall Catherine's constant remarks of redemption." Samuel took a moment to get ready. "Some of those men are lost souls who have joined the wrong group. Similar to Axel. He has battle experience and military training. Such men are not criminals by birth. They simply got lost." "What about the others?" Deputy Mitchell inquired. "The others will discover that fear is reciprocal." Samuel's voice was one of serene confidence rather than intimidation. "The Crimson Reapers will either have found a new purpose or be finished before daybreak. In any case, tonight marks the end of their reign of terror." The roar of motorcycles in the distance grew gradually louder as Ironwood Bluff went black. Tommy told the assembled townspeople what he had heard in the church basement. Rattler used threats of violence to rally his troops in the deserted warehouse. And Samuel Hunter prepared for a confrontation that would become a legend on a peaceful farm on the outskirts of town. However, even he was unable to foresee how this night would change Ironwood Bluff's very essence in addition to the Crimson Reapers. As Samuel made his last changes to the farm's lighting system, the boom of incoming motorcycles echoed through the night air. He had placed work lights all over the property, although they weren't supposed to be on. By forming bright light pools encircled by deeper shadows, they were intended to cause blindness. Ideal for someone who was adept at moving covertly. Rattler used binoculars to scan the lit farm from their staging area half a mile down the road. Group 2 approaches from the west, whereas Group 1 approaches from the east. We put a box around him and then light it up. Axel examined the layout of the property with increasing discomfort. Since the morning, something had changed. Strange shadows where none should be, relocated irrigation pipes, and moved equipment. This setup isn't correct, boss. Are you starting to change your mind? Rattler scoffed. Axel retaliated after gaining tactical awareness. Take a look at their light locations. That placement isn't arbitrary. He's directing our approach vectors and establishing kill zones. It's not a military installation, it's a farm. Vulture sneered, but Ghost was slowly nodding. Ghost noted that those tractors weren't parked that way this morning. Those irrigation pipelines, too. They are developing channeled strategies. He is precisely guiding us in the direction he desires. Rattler lost patience. 30 of us, one of him, enough. Even if he has the entire freaking farm rigged, I don't care. He cannot be in all places at once. Get out. Headlights pierced the darkness as the first group of bikers sped approached the east entrance. Their motorcycles abruptly lost grip on the mysterious damp terrain as they went between two tractors. 3 riders fell, their bikes slipping innocuously among bales of hay that had not been there just hours before. Someone yelled, "Contact left." However, their night vision was ruined by the intense work lights, which produced confusing shadows where a figure appeared to move before disappearing. When the second group heard the ruckus, they hurried in the direction of the western approach. After making it 20 yards onto the land, they discovered that a fallen tree that had undoubtedly not been there during their earlier reconnaissance had blocked their way. Rattler ordered over their radios as they pushed across the fields. 5 cyclists tore through the wheat with their engines. They reached the halfway point before their bikes started to splutter and die due to something that had been poured into their gas during staging, clogging their fuel lines. How did he arrive at our bicycles? Over the radio, Stryker's terrified voice crackled. He didn't, Axel said somberly. Earlier, he reached our gasoline supply. Traditional sabotage strategy. Samuel went through his own killing ground like a shadow in the turmoil. Intimate terrain knowledge combined with years of special operations experience. Riders were disarmed and incapacitated one by an opponent they couldn't seem to locate. From the shadows, someone yelled, "He's tearing us apart." In search of shelter, a rider burst through the barn door. Samuel was waiting for him. He appeared so abruptly that it was almost magical. The Marine Corps. Observing the man's posture, Samuel questioned in a casual manner. 3 years, sir. Before understanding he was reporting to his target, the rider automatically responded, "Force recon." I believed so. You're telegraphing your left side, despite your good training. With a swift movement, Samuel disarmed the rider, who was holding his own knife casually. You learned better from them. Axel stood close to the main house and watched in increasing awe as their attack force was methodically dismantled. He said, "This isn't just special operations training. This is not the same thing." Furious by the state of affairs, Rattler reached for a can of gas. Burn it. Burn everything. He discovered that the can was filled with water when he attempted to spray fuel on the barn wall. During their staging, they had replenished all of their fuel supplies. Are you trying to find this? From the darkness came Samuel's voice. He displayed an assortment of gas caps. Your supply lines should never be left exposed. Simple tactical mistake. Rattler whirled and shot blindly. The shot missed, and then Samuel appeared, disarming him with a dexterity that befitted decades of practice. With his arm pinned behind him in a grip that seemed more like iron than flesh, Rattler was face down in the dirt. What was your biggest error, do you know? Quietly, Samuel inquired. The protection racket, that is. Not endangering my farm. It was endangering the ones I love. I've lived in this community for 25 years. I consider these folks to be my family. Ghost finally put the strategy into practice while observing from behind an overturned bike. Hold on. That pattern of disarming. That's... Don't you think you're him? The Ranger of Ghosts? That person who busted the Carson gang? As the senior riders began to recognize one another, the fighting subsided. In the world of law enforcement, the Ghost Ranger was legendary. Hardened criminals would surrender at the mention of his name since he was a Texas Ranger so proficient at infiltration and takedowns. Holding on to Rattler, Samuel responded, "That was a lifetime ago. I wanted to keep my badge, so I traded it for a plow." Axel took a step forward, his hands up. He beckoned the other riders to dismount. The stories were told to all of us. We never had a chance if he is who Ghost claims him to be. Through clenched teeth, Rattler growled, regardless of who he was. He is no longer alive. Do you hear me? Dead. Actually, as patrol car lights abruptly illuminated the scene, Sheriff Langston's voice could be heard. You've been arrested. Deputy Mitchell came out from where she had been recording everything, by the house. Everything, including their attempted arson, was captured on camera, Sheriff. After releasing Rattler into the sheriff's care, Samuel faced the other Crimson Reapers. Nursing injuries were among them. Others still appeared prepared for combat. However, several of them displayed something different in their eyes, particularly the veterans. Recognition. Show respect. And perhaps, just possibly, a glimpse of what they had lost in the process. You have two options, Samuel said to them. Continue down a path that leads to incarceration or worse, or... He hesitated, recalling what Nora had said about salvation. Or we can discuss how to better utilize your abilities. Axel took a step ahead. In what manner? It's the kind that creates rather than destroys. The type that shields rather than frightens. Samuel pointed to the surrounding property. This community is in need of someone with your skills and training. It simply must be used properly. Nobody could have imagined how those remarks would change Ironwood Bluff as a whole, not just the Crimson Reapers, as the night's pandemonium subsided into an uncomfortable stillness. The actual conflict had not ended. It was only getting started. But instead of using weapons, it would be fought with understanding. Redemption rather than retaliation. As the pandemonium at Samuel Farms subsided into an uneasy stillness, dawn bathed the sky in tones of purple and gold. While Dr. Martinez set up a makeshift medical station in the barn, Sheriff Langston deputies investigated the scene, gathering firearms and taking statements. Small groups of the surviving Crimson Reapers sat, the dust and dirt of the night's abortive attack still visible on their leather cuts. Even after the night's activity, the elderly ranger's motions remained precise and controlled as Axel watched Samuel assisted Dr. Martinez in treating a young rider's damaged wrist. At last, he continued, "You could have killed us all. Why didn't you?" "Wouldn't have fixed anything," Samuel said, handing a bandage to Dr. Martinez. "Violence is the end. Something has to be started." Ghost dropped his military vest and nursed a cup of coffee nearby. The Ranger of Ghosts. "In the service, we used to hear stories about you, man. They claimed that you could take down any target and infiltrate any group." Samuel kept working, but that was another existence. Discovered that fighting isn't limited to using weapons. When Nora Harper arrived with multiple baskets and the smell of coffee and freshly baked biscuits filled the air, the barn doors creaked open. Samuel shook his head when Deputy Mitchell attempted to stop her. As if at a church social, Nora sat up on a workbench and declared, "No one makes decisions well on an empty stomach. Who's hungry now?" A moment of bewildered stillness was caused by the bizarre sight of a grandma giving breakfast to the same gang who had terrorized the neighborhood. Then, with a murmured thank you, one of the younger cyclists, still covered in road dust and defeat, took a biscuit. The rider murmured softly to Nora, "Your boy has a good arm. I apologize for pursuing him earlier." Nora said, preparing coffee, Tommy's always been too curious for his own good. However, curiosity can occasionally guide us in the right direction. With a distressed look on his face, Sheriff Langston drew Samuel away. The DA's office's David Myers is en route. How precisely do I explain all of this to him? Be honest with him, Samuel said. Some men found something else when they came searching for danger. What about them? Langston gave the Crimson Reapers a nod. Gathered enough proof to imprison the majority of them for years. Samuel observed while Ghost received instruction from Dr. Martinez on how to properly clean and bandage a cut. With firm hands, the former scout was listening intently. Axel was already forming cleanup teams with other veterans around, with military training taking over on its own. Take a good look at them, David. Most of them were once in the military. They got lost and joined the wrong crowd. They won't be able to find their way again in prison. Are you referring to rehabilitation? They were joined by Deputy Mitchell, who had a notepad filled with the happenings of the night. 2 communities were terrified by these men. Samuel retorted, and now they have an opportunity to make it right. However, they require a purpose, something to believe in. Stryker assisted Nora in carrying her empty baskets back to her car across the barn. With hesitation, he said, "Ma'am. Regarding yesterday's events at the market. Please don't apologize to Jim Parker," Nora politely interrupted him. "Even better, demonstrate them with deeds. Young man, words are wind. Actions are what count." As the sun rose higher, more people came. Pastor Brown showed up with questions and coffee. The hardware store's Frank Turner looked at the damage like a contractor. The atmosphere changed a little with each arrival, converting adversaries into neighbors, if not yet friends. As Samuel packed her medical supplies, Dr. Martinez warned her that it would not be simple. "Not the ones I wrapped today, but some of them are carrying significant wounds." "There's never anything worth doing," Samuel said. "However, each man in this barn faces a decision. All they have to do is see the alternative." At last Vulture, who had been patiently observing everything, came over to Samuel. "We were respected and someone in Copper Canyon. What are we meant to be now?" Samuel firmly met his eyes, "Something better. Respect is what you desire. This time, earn it the proper way." Tommy's entrance cut the moment short. Despite his grandmother's harsh expression, the teenager rushed into the barn with excitement. "Everyone in town is talking about what occurred, Mr. Hunter. They claim that you are a legend of some sort." Samuel clarified that legends are merely stories, Tommy. Real decisions are at issue here. Samuel explained his plan, and the Crimson Reapers listened. Real support, not protection rackets, was what the farm needed. The community needed people who could use their skills effectively. It would be difficult. There would be opposition, doubt, and laborious effort to come. "Won't work," said one cyclist. "We won't be accepted in town." Dr. Martinez retorted, "They will if you prove yourselves worthy of acceptance. Veterans organizations are waiting for men with your experience. Frank needs people with skills. Programs for problematic youth are run by Pastor Brown. And the uninterested ones?" Deputy Mitchell made a direct inquiry. Sheriff Langston responded, "There's always room in the county jail. You have a choice." Axel stood, having made up his mind. "I'm sick and tired of breaking things. Instead, it's time to construct something." He took off and set aside his Crimson Reaper's cut. Others trailed behind, first hesitantly and then more firmly. As the morning progressed, Samuel observed changes taking place. Ghost and Dr. Martinez talked about medical training. Frank was questioned by Stryker about working as an apprentice at the hardware business. After a lengthy private discussion with Pastor Brown, even Vulture consented to take other options under consideration. However, Samuel was aware that this was only the start. Real transformation would be difficult. The community would object. It would be difficult to break old habits. And other minds were still poisoned by Rattler's influence. Nevertheless, Tommy excitedly shows young riders about the property as Nora shares coffee with old foes. For the first time since his ranger days, Samuel felt anything. The fulfillment of witnessing justice carried out via transformation rather than coercion. Nora whispered to him that Catherine would be pleased. She always stressed that wearing the badge wasn't the only way you could change people's lives. Samuel nodded as he observed his wheat fields turning gold as the sun rose. The struggle of the night was ended, but the real labor was only getting started. The hardest battles are sometimes fought with patience, discernment, and the will to give people another chance rather than with fists or firearms. The Ghost Ranger's legend would eventually be forgotten. Perhaps an even greater legacy to leave behind was the tale of how a little village learned to turn adversaries into allies. When the first trucks arrived at Samuel's property, the morning sun had just begun to rise. Arriving in regular clothes, former Crimson Reapers had lost their gang insignia and leather cuts. It was a dramatic change in appearance. Many of them appeared startlingly youthful, even unsure, without their imposing equipment. Relying on his expertise, Axel arranged them with military efficiency. Take 4 guys, Ghost, and begin removing the broken fencing. You're in the hardware store today with Frank, Stryker. Form up, the rest of you. Samuel is interested in inspecting irrigation systems. As Samuel moved through the line of guys, he noticed a range of emotions on their faces. Some displayed resolve, some bitterness, and some still carried the shame from the night before. A young rider who had almost crashed during the abortive attack was halted in front of him. "Son, what's your background?" "Sir, Army mechanic. Afghanistan on 2 trips." It was an instinctual reaction. Military attire disguised as civilian attire. "Excellent. Frank wants assistance fixing the tractor. Let him see what you're capable of." As the morning went on, there were minor triumphs and subtle difficulties. Ghost managed repair teams effectively after realizing he had a knack for order. Others found it difficult to complete basic duties, becoming more frustrated until Samuel's gentle direction enabled them to succeed. When Jim Parker's pickup pulled up, the relative calm was broken. The farmer came out with a hard-lined face and a broken hand still covered with bandages. Many of the old riders stiffened, recalling their part in his injury. With his voice echoing over the yard, Parker said to Samuel, "Heard you were giving these thugs a second chance." Samuel took him on after they had destroyed my family's business. "You've known me for 20 years, Jim. Now believe me." "You?" "Yes. Them." Parker pointed at the laborers. "That's a different matter." Stryker took off his work gloves and stepped forward. "Mr. Parker. When your hand was broken, I was there. It wasn't stopped by me. I should have, but I chose not to. Sorry doesn't make things better, but I'd like to assist you get back on your feet." "For nothing." For a moment, amazement took the place of wrath as Parker examined the young man. "Words are nice, but what matters are deeds." Samuel came to a close. "Jim, give them an opportunity to show you. All I'm asking is that." Frank Turner observed Stryker carefully inventory building materials at the hardware store. The boy has a keen understanding of numbers. During her routine inspection, he informed Deputy Mitchell. "I never imagined mentioning one of them in that way." Emily made notes and fixed them. The sheriff requests progress updates every day. The town council is anxious. That night's town hall meeting showed how anxious they were. Concerned individuals filled the church basement, which Pastor Brown had donated for the event. This neighborhood was frightened by them. Mike Henderson got to his feet. "We are now expected to simply forgive and move on. Remember not to forget." Samuel spoke to the assembly. "Change. All of the men that work on my farm are there voluntarily. They are making the decision to change. Those who failed to select a candidate yelled. Rattler's remaining supporters are in custody, where they belong. Sheriff Langston gave them assurance. Those seeking redemption are the target audience for this program. Preliminary proposals for veteran support services were presented by Dr. Martinez. Job training was discussed by Frank Turner. To everyone's amazement, Nora Harper announced cookery classes. A man who is unable to properly feed himself cannot be trusted, she said, evoking unanticipated chuckles. Axel has his own problem back at the farm. Due to past gang rivalries, 2 former riders had gotten into a brawl. He discovered them with their hands up behind the barn. This is no longer who we are. His voice rang with military authority as he yelled. Do you wish to fight? Under supervision, perform it in the training ring WH. I'll wearing gloves. If not, you're out. Astonished by the prompt reaction to the line of command, the men parted ways. From the shadows, Samuel gave a nod of agreement. Gang hierarchy was being inevitably replaced by military discipline. Another surprising development came to light during Ghost's medical training session with Dr. Martinez. She informed Samuel that he had a natural bedside manner. Anyone, with the right education, become a competent paramedic. When a rival gang of 3 black riders arrived in town, it was the biggest challenge of the day. They arrived in an attempt to increase their territory after learning of the Crimson Reaper's metamorphosis. When the bikes arrived, the reconstituted riders were working on Parker's market stall. The Black Horsemen began their standard intimidation routine under the leadership of a man named Snake. Snake snarled, "Well, look what we have here." Carpenter ants were Crimson Reapers. Old impulses arose as Stryker tightened his hold on his hammer. But Ghost's hand on his shoulder was steady. "We no longer do that." Calmly, Ghost said. "Additionally, this town is closed." "Is that correct?" A toolbox was overturned by a snake. "Who will prevent us?" "You. A bunch of neutered people." He never got it done. Jim Parker came forward with a broken hand. "The firm owned by my family is being rebuilt by these men. I've taken over their protection." Parker was joined by the reformed riders, who put up a united front of community rather than violence. This unexpected cooperation caused the Black Horsemen to retreat in disarray. Samuel later gathered the soldiers as the sun sank on their first full day of honest work. "You have choices today," he said. "Tradition versus innovation. You gain trust each time you made the proper decision. Trust is similar to this farm. Grows over time. Requires ongoing care. But it's worth it for the harvest." Axel gazed at the reconstructed market stall, his hands filthy after hard work. "I never imagined that something that didn't involve damaging stuff would make me feel proud." "Days coming," Samuel said, "when you'll be more proud of the things you've created than the things you've destroyed. That is the beginning of transformation." The men scattered to their different residences and makeshift shelters. Emergency housing had been arranged by Pastor Brown. There would be additional trials of their dedication and fresh challenges tomorrow. But something significant had been demonstrated today. There was room for change. Nora was waiting with hot coffee on Samuel's porch when he made his evening perimeter check. She claimed to have seen what transpired in the market. Jim Parker was standing alongside them rather than in opposition to them. "That is a miracle," as Catherine would say. "No miracle," Samuel clarified. "Just people finding their true selves. Sometimes all they need is someone to think it exists." Ironwood Bluff was enveloped in night, but something was stirring in the shadows. The seeds of change had been sown. All they needed now was time to develop. Before daybreak, Sheriff Langston's truck sped down the access road to the farm, kicking up dust. During his morning check, Samuel had already spotted the approaching headlights and was outside. He only had to glance at the sheriff's face to realize what was going on. Langston coldly verified that Rattler had fled from detention. 2 guards were hurt. On the way to the county, a transport van was struck. His ardent supporters awaited him. With his tactical mind already engaged, Samuel nodded. With him, how many went out? Venom and Blade, the poorest of the group, are among the 5. A file was handed over by the sheriff. I've heard that other chapters are supporting them. This might quickly become ugly. The morning briefing was very important inside the barn. With his militaristic demeanor more noticeable than before, Axel stood in front of the reformed horseman. This needs to be heard by everyone. Rattler is available and will arrive. Now is the time for everybody who wants to leave. There was no sound in the barn. At last, Ghost raised his voice. To what do you walk away? Are we once again thugs? We now call this place home. We guard it. Samuel looked at the faces in front of him. These men had been attacking his land a week ago. They were prepared to defend it now. Though incomplete, the change was genuine. Samuel warned that they would try to get in touch with you. Former brothers, old buddies. They'll make references to your past and allegiance. Began already. Stryker's phone displayed texts from unidentified numbers when he took it out. Messages have been coming in all night. Promises combined with threats. Dr. Martinez showed up carrying boxes of supplies. Additional trauma equipment was added to her regular medical packs. Heard the news. We might need to be ready, I thought. With strained efficiency, the day went by. Security patrols were coordinated by Axel and Ghost. Their military background is coming in very handy. As though to demonstrate their dedication through hard work, other reformed riders doubled their effort. Jim Parker saw the transformed men at the market support his position. He told Samuel, I never thought I'd say this. However, they put in more effort than I do. Stryker stayed up late yesterday to modify the display boxes. Claimed that he wished to make robbery more difficult. Samuel noted that, man knows the weaknesses because he used to look for them. Instead of taking advantage of the gaps, he is now filling them. At midday, the first test was conducted. Former Crimson Reapers still sporting their colors, 3 motorcycles thundered into town. They made a beeline for the market, where Stryker and Ghost were doing repairs. My brothers. With a shout, the front-runner took off his helmet. Rattler makes a statement. It's time to return home. Everything is forgiven. Ghost continued working without looking up. I'm home already. Say, thank you, but no thanks to Rattler. Are you abandoning your family? The voice of the rider grew stern. For what purpose? Taking up a handyman role? With his tools down, the Stryker turned to face the guests. Families don't take advantage of others for financial gain. Communities are not terrorized by family. This is a true family that we are creating here. The altercation attracted notice. Deputy Mitchell showed up with her hand close to her gun. Samuel, however, waved her back. The men had to pass this test by themselves. The rider spat. You may be brainwashed, Rattler remarked. I suppose he was correct. All of you are now dead to us. Nora Harper came out of her cafe carrying fresh coffee as the bikers thundered off. She handed out mugs and said, well handled boys. Choosing right above easy. That is true strength. Samuel assembled his core group back at the property. Among the reformed riders, Axel, Ghost, and Stryker had shown themselves to be natural leaders. Each contributed unique abilities. The military discipline of Axel. The strategic thinking of Ghost. The youth and zeal of the Stryker. Axel cautioned that Rattler would not simply give up. He is overly arrogant and hateful. Samuel answered, then we give him something unexpected. Not superior force, not weakness. We demonstrate to him the nature of true power. Pastor Brown arrived in the afternoon with updates from his contacts in nearby towns. Rattler's assembling troops, requesting assistance from other gangs. However, he is also losing favor. News of what's going on here is getting out. A few gangs are waiting and observing. What are you waiting for? Deputy Mitchell inquired. Samuel responded, to see if change is possible. If folks like Rattler can be defeated, it will be through transformation rather than force. Samuel discovered Ghost inspecting the security cameras Frank had placed throughout the property as nightfall drew near. There was trouble on the former scout's face. Do you have a thought? Ghost said, I wonder if we're really worth all this. The faith. The second opportunity. A few of us made horrible mistakes. Samuel retorted that being deserving isn't the point of redemption. It's about making the decision to improve. Every day, every decision. Constructing a new object. More communications from Rattler's camp arrived during the night. More attempts to break the resolve of the rehabilitated rider. However, something unexpected was taking place. Every intimidation attempt and threat simply made them more determined to make a difference. Sheriff Langston updated the emergency response plans in Town Hall. He clarified, we're not just guarding against Rattler. We are defending the possibility of change. More important than any gang fight is that. Another layer of change was uncovered during Dr. Martinez's evening therapy session. The men were talking about their hopes, worries, and pasts. She informed Samuel that they weren't merely altering their behavior. Their self-perception is evolving. Axel and Samuel strolled about his property as midnight drew near. The ex-enforcer combined his military experience with local understanding to create an amazing security rotation. Axel stated abruptly, you knew this would happen. It would not be silent with new Rattler. You encouraged us to establish genuine ties here for that reason. Samuel gave a nod. The hardest fight is not against other people, but rather against our former selves. Community, belonging, and purpose are more powerful than gang loyalty. Tommy Harper assisted Stryker in shutting down the market stall in town. By bridging the gap between the younger citizens and the rehabilitated horsemen, the adolescent had dispelled mistrust and terror. Tommy told him, my grandmother says you guys are like her garden, claims that all you needed to grow was the appropriate soil. Ironwood Bluff was enveloped in darkness, but few found it easy to fall asleep. There would be more difficulties and loyalty tests tomorrow. However, a fundamental change had occurred. Now, the individuals who had threatened this town were prepared to protect it. Through the power of transformation, not through violence. With the crack of dawn, Deputy Mitchell's radio came alive. At Turner's Hardware, 3 bikers were seen searching for trouble. Samuel was already on his way to his pickup when she arrived. Behind him, Axel and a Ghost fell in. As they drove, Samuel reminded them to remember. We don't escalate, we contain. You shouldn't destroy these foes. These men are still figuring things out. Stryker was defending Frank's entrance at the hardware store when Rattler's men confronted him. The younger rider was dwarfed by their commander, Tank, a burly man. Tank hissed, last chance, traitor. The boss insists that all is forgiven if you return today. Remain in the death you have chosen. Stryker remained still. No, I'm going with life. Not just surviving, but real life. Examine your surroundings. Here, we're constructing something. Tank spat and reached for Stryker's throat, showing signs of weakness. But before he could make contact, Ghost materialized at his side. Just standing ready, not attacking. Ghost whispered, don't. You can't finish what you've started. No more. Tank noticed the changes in his erstwhile brothers, and his hand froze. The gang-trained hostility had vanished. Something more regimented and under control took its place. Axel had placed repaired riders at key locations behind Ghost. Prepared, but not menacing. When Samuel moved forward, the dynamic was immediately altered. "It's been a long time, Tank. What's up with that shoulder? That person you heard in Fallujah?" Tank was surprised for a moment. "How did you?" "In the same manner, I am aware that you have a sick mother in Denver. In the same way, I am aware that you give her money each month. Rattler's cause isn't the reason you're here. You believe you have no other option, which is why you are here." The realization struck like a punch to the body. As Samuel went on, Tank's combative posture faltered. "A decision is always available. Here, ask your brothers. When you wake up, ask them how it feels to be proud of what you're doing rather than what you're destroying." With survey papers in hand, Frank Turner came out of his shop. "When you're done here, Stryker, I need your assistance with these renovation plans. I think someone who is aware of security requirements would be helpful." The atmosphere was changed by the request's normalcy and the implicit nonchalant acceptance. Tank turned his attention from Stryker to the plans, noticing that his ex-brother was now actively participating in business-related choices. "This is what you're actually doing? With uncertainty in place of hostility," he asked. "Simply working and leading a normal life?" Stryker answered, "Better than usual. Now that we've earned it, we're appreciated." More bikes raced into view before Tank could react. 10 motorcyclists were led by Rattler himself. As they dismounted with their guns in view, the scene immediately became more heated. Rattler hissed at Samuel, "Corrupting more of my guys, should have known you'd be here." Samuel simply answered, "They're not your men. They were only individuals you exploited for your personal benefit." Samuel waved back to Sheriff Langston and Deputy Mitchell as they approached. This conflict had to unfold in a different way. Rattler pointed disdainfully at the reconstituted horsemen and said, "Look at them pretending to be someone they're not while playing at honest employment. All of you are killers. You'll only ever be that." "No," Axel took the initiative. "We were fighters who became lost. We're finding it once more now. There is a distinction." Tension increased as the situation dragged on. However, something unexpected was taking place. The restored bikers weren't reverting to their previous violent tendencies. They adopted a protective, defensive posture. Of the shop. Of the city. Of their new course. "Rattler, do you desire violence?" Silently, Ghost inquired. "Examine your surroundings. Take a look at what we received. Sentences in prison. Fractured bones. Lives were destroyed. Or have a look at the things we've constructed in just 2 weeks." Nora Harper's words broke the tension as if on cue. "I have breakfast biscuits and fresh coffee if you guys are finished posing." Even for people who are still learning proper etiquette. The ridiculousness of her timing. Something about the confrontation was broken by its simple routine. In fact, 2 of Rattler's new recruits chuckled, which caused their boss to give them a deadly scowl. Rattler growled, but there was less confidence in his voice. "This isn't over. We're heading out, Tank." Tank paused, glancing between his former brothers and his old leader. Samuel witnessed the beginning of change at that precise time. Samuel whispered to him that doors constantly open. "When you're prepared." Deputy Mitchell moved toward Tank as Rattler's group roared off. "You have a choice. Make the proper decisions." Tank examined Stryker's architectural ideas, the hardware store, and the community meeting to bolster its own. He took off his gang colors and placed them the Frank's counter without saying a word. "Do you have any vacancies?" Gruffly, he asked. "As it happens, I am rather knowledgeable in building security." The confrontation that morning was a watershed. Word swiftly spread that the reformed riders had opted for prudence over retaliation and had guarded the town without resorting to violence. More significantly, their acts demonstrated that their newfound strength originated from a deeper source, whereas Rattler's power was based on fear. Samuel discovered Ghost working late that night at the farm, improving the perimeter lighting. Ghost saw that Rattler was losing more than just territory. He is losing the conviction that we needed him, which was the source of his strength. Samuel concurred that while fear shackles, purpose grows. Each individual who makes a better decision loosens his grip on the others. Stryker and Tank, who were once rivals, ate dinner together at Nora's diner in town and are currently organizing security upgrades for the area. Deputy Mitchell marveled at the change as she saw it from her patrol car. She told Sheriff Langston, "I never thought I'd say this, but they might actually pull this off." The sheriff gave a nod, but his face stayed worried. Rattler is not finished. Men like him are particularly dangerous when they begin to lose their influence. Samuel returned to the farm and watched his wheat fields as the sun sank. The triumph of today did not come from defeating Rattler's soldiers. It involved presenting them in a different manner. The true conflict was not one of respect or territory. It was for the soul of every man who had to decide between his potential and his current self. Everything changed with Tank's information. He shared all he knew about Rattler's plans while sitting in Samuel's kitchen with his hands encircling a coffee mug. With stern ears, Sheriff Langston listened as Deputy Mitchell made notes. "He's asking for every favor he can," Tank clarified. "Iron wolves from the south and black riders from the east are promising them territory, retribution, or whatever else they want to hear. However, it's now personal and not just about the place." "How many?" With his tactical mind already engaged, Samuel inquired. 30 bikes have been confirmed, perhaps more will follow. It's hardly the worst part, though. Tank paused. He has a contact at the Copper Canyon Police Department. He got out of transit that way. Sheriff Langston stood up. "Are you certain of that?" "I overheard him on the phone. A person named Phillips was mentioned." Emily Mitchell's face recognized Deputy Phillips. "He moved there half a year ago." Samuel took note of possible approaches on the map that was laid out on his kitchen table. He will attempt to scare anyone considering abandoning his side by overwhelming us with numbers and putting on a show of power. Axel was outside training the reconstituted riders in defense. Because of his military background, he was able to teach them to defend rather than attack. To protect instead of destroy. He told them to check their fields of fire. "Keep in mind that we don't intend to do harm to anyone. Control and containment, as Samuel taught us." Ghost showed up with more intellect. "Last night, 2 more riders departed Rattler's camp. They want to come with us." "Why did they believe it?" Samuel inquired. "They were shaken by Tank's defection. They also witnessed the events in Frank's store. Claimed to have witnessed strength devoid of aggression for the first time." The conversation was cut short by the appearance of Dr. Martinez. She brought paperwork from her support group for veterans. In private, she said to Samuel, "You must see this. I learned a lot about Rattler's past." A recognizable pattern emerged from the files. Marcus Rattler Mitchell completed 3 tours in Iraq as a decorated Marine. He was ambushed and lost his entire unit. Found his wife gone when he got home. His life in fragments. His family was replaced by the gang. He uses violence as a means of control. He is engaged in more than just territorial conflict. Samuel became aware that he was struggling with losing control. Identity loss. It helps to know what triggers him. Dr. Martinez concurred, but it also increases his risk. The reconstituted rider's metamorphosis was still impressive around town. They were the first on the scene when the ancient mill caught fire. Preparing for containment and evacuation prior to the fire department's arrival. "Do you see that?" Nora Harper told her diner's skeptics. "The Anderson family's business was just saved by those same folks who used to torment us." Peace, however, was not meant to endure. The sound of oncoming motorcyclists arrived at midday. Black Rider scouts putting defenses to the test. At the Arcade, they discovered Striker and Ghost. Well protected and fortified now. Rattler makes a statement. The chief scout declared. Full force tomorrow night. We'll burn it all down or you'll go back into the fold. They discovered resolve rather than fear. Ghost took a step forward and spoke with fresh authority. Inform Rattler that we have finished burning. We are now protecting. Guard. The scout chuckled. With what? Tools for the garden. Samuel's voice, coming from behind them, was more powerful than firearms. Redeeming, purposeful, and community. Although the scouts left, their message persisted. Samuel assembled his core group at the property that night. A few weeks ago, it would have been unimaginable for Axel, Ghost, Striker, and Tank to create a leadership circle. Axel concluded, they're counting on us breaking under pressure, assuming we'll go back to typing. Ghost remarked, then we show them something new. Not defense just. Change. Tank gave a slow nod. Like me, the majority of those cyclists are coming tomorrow. Following out of false allegiance, fear, or habit. They must find another path. Samuel looked at his troops who had changed. It's not about fighting tomorrow. It's about using restraint to demonstrate strength. Strength through defense. The town got ready for nightfall. Instead than using guns and barriers, employ a new form of protection. Volunteers creating emergency kits were allowed to work at Frank Turner's store. Nora Harper set up a family support system. The Church of Pastor Brown was turned into a hub for cooperation. Samuel discovered Deputy Mitchell looking over security footage at the farm. Did you ever imagine working with ex-gang members? He inquired. Never, she said. However, observing their transformation and better choices. I became a cop for that reason. To assist folks in returning. Few people slept as the night became darker. Reformed riders kept guard over their new village on the other side of town. Striker told Tommy about his personal metamorphosis and reaffirmed defenses at the market. He told the teenager, I used to think that being strong meant making people fear you. I now understand that it's about earning their trust. Samuel took a final stroll around his land. Examining plans and verifying positions. All they had constructed will be put to the test tomorrow. However, saw his changed troops and the pride in their eyes as they defended rather than threatened. He was aware that a significant victory had already been achieved. The territorial struggle might go either way. However, the struggle for souls was already demonstrating success. Every man who made a wiser decision, every instance of safety rather than devastation, demonstrated that transformation wasn't merely feasible. It couldn't be stopped. Ghost discovered Samuel on his doorstep as daylight drew near. You know, I thought it was weakness when you first mentioned redemption. I get it now. It is the most difficult type of strength. Samuel nodded as he observed his wheat fields turning gold as the sun rose. Today had brought victory, but tomorrow would bring mayhem. Now, the individuals who had threatened this town were prepared to protect it. Through the force of transformation, not through violence. As the sun sank, the sound of motorcycles reverberated around Ironwood Bluff. Rattler marched along Main Street with his gathered troops. There are 40 bikes total, including a mix of his devoted Crimson Reapers, Black Riders, and Iron Wolves. Like irate eyes, their headlights pierced the encroaching dusk. Samuel, who had a good view of the town's key locations from the roof of Frank's hardware shop, watched. Defensive positions were manned by reformed riders who had spent the previous day preparing them. Recall that his voice was heard over their radio station. To fight is not our purpose. To show them a better path, we are here. Rattler's troops moved across town as his words roared via a megaphone. Traitors, make your last move. Burn with these townspeople you act like you care about, or go back to your true family. He wasn't prepared for the response. He discovered that the town was unexpectedly ready, rather than displaying protective aggressiveness or dread. With Dr. Martinez and her staff prepared to treat both friends and foes, the market square had been converted into an aid station. Nora Harper's cafe was still open, tables arranged, coffee brewing. Family. From where he stood by the market, Ghost's voice could be heard. Marcus, true family does not govern by terror. Rattler's head jerked in the direction of the voice that had not used his true name for years. From another angle, Axel added, real family builds, gives purpose and protection. Strategically positioned barricades obstructed the first wave of bikes as they stormed the market square. To channel, not to trap. Bicycles found the route dangerous due to water from reopened fire hydrants. Frank and Stryker set up construction lights that produced confusing patterns. Is this your strategy? Rattler chuckled, but his voice carried a hint of doubt. Lights and water. No, Samuel said, now standing on the top of the hardware store. Here it is. The repaired riders moved at his signal. To defend, not to attack. They aided those who stumbled, led stranded bikers away from dangers, and provided protection rather than aggression. Tank's voice echoed around the plaza. Take a peek at what we're constructing here. This is the strongest I've ever been, it's not weakness. A few iron wolves started to retreat, perplexed by the absence of aggressive opposition. They would arrive anticipating a brawl rather than a show of solidarity. Rattler lost control as he noticed his coalition faltering. Burn everything, everything. However, his troops discovered their weapons were deactivated when they reached for them. Tank had warned of firing pins taken out by infiltrators during their staging. Ghost's strategic strategy had resulted in water contamination of their fuel tanks during their previous halt. Rattler growled at Samuel, you orchestrated this, made my own strategies work against me. No, Samuel retorted. Demonstrated a more effective use of your men's abilities. The same is true for you, Marcus. Rattler's calmness was shaken by the mention of his name once more. He pulled out a concealed handgun, but he was up against more than just Samuel, his own old teammates. With determination, not with weapons. Observe them, Samuel added. Take a peek. They're in good condition. They're not helpless. They are more powerful than they were when you were in charge of them. Now more bikes were leaving. When the leader of the Black Riders realized what was happening, he gave the order for his men to leave. Only his most ruthless supporters remained when the Iron Wolves did the same. It's done, Marcus, Ghost muttered. We discovered a new method. An improved method. Rattler glanced at his erstwhile brethren, and his gun faltered. Instead of betrayal, he witnessed development. He found strength where he expected to find weakness. Not in combat, but in defense. Deputy Mitchell holstered her firearm and came gently up. It's up to you now. Stop this right or you'll be left alone. Like a wire on the verge of breaking, the moment stretched. One of Rattler's last devoted supporters then took off his gang colors from behind him. I'm done, declared the rider. They are correct, this is no longer a sign of strength. Bikes began to leave one by one. Not in despair or terror, but in reflection. Instead of destroying a town, they discovered a model of salvation. Rattler had to make a decision as his forces dissipated and his might diminished. On the trigger, his finger tensed and then relaxed. What became of us? He dropped the rifle from his hand and murmured. When did we get lost? We all get lost sometimes, Samuel said, stepping down from his perch. Not discovering it again is the strength. The changed riders started to assist in cleaning up the little damage as Sheriff Langston carried Rattler into prison, this time gently. The town had defended itself with superior intent rather than superior violence. As usual, Nora Harper was already serving coffee to both old adversaries and allies. There's nothing like a hot cup in a willing ear to help clear thinking, she said. Samuel discovered Ghost and Axel near the market square later that evening as the town started to calm down and the last bikes rumbled away. "What did you think won tonight?" Ghost inquired. "Nor strategy, nor preparation. The ability to choose." It was evident to all the men that they had won. As he observed his changed warriors aiding in the restoration of their community, Samuel nodded. The victory had come from proving to the adversaries that they were capable of more than just defeating them. Even though Ironwood Bluff was enveloped in darkness, change was nonetheless occurring there. Far outside their little community, seeds of change had been sown. How far the ripples of their miracle would reach was the question, not whether it could be reproduced. As Samuel strolled around the market square, evaluating the little damage from the battle the night before, dawn painted Ironwood Bluff in soft hues. The air was already filled with the sound of hammers and saws as the locals and the reunited riders repaired what little had been damaged. Sheriff Langston appeared to have not slept when he arrived in his police cruiser. "Word is getting around about what happened here, as I've already received calls from 3 different counties. They're curious about how we accomplished it." While observing Ghost instruct 2 former black riders on how to properly brace a storefront, Samuel retorted, "We didn't do anything. They did. They made the decision to change." By mid-morning, news vans had started to arrive, lured by reports of the altercation. While Dr. Martinez arranged a more formal presentation of their rehabilitation program, Deputy Mitchell held them at bay. Looking over her notes, she informed Samuel that the media was referring to it as the Ironwood Bluff miracle. "It's not a miracle, though. It requires perseverance, commitment, and faith in second opportunities." Axel met with officials from nearby towns in Nora's diner, which turned into an unofficial command headquarters. His military demeanor gave his explanations of their tactics credibility. He stressed that this is not about fighting gangs. Reclaiming forgotten warriors is the goal. Every guy on the planet is the brother or son of someone. They just lost sight of their intended identity. Tank overheard snippets of calls from other gang members while collaborating with Frank to strengthen the security of the hardware business. He said they're asking inquiries. They want to build their own programs, not just join us. When they saw what had occurred to Rattler, the Iron Wolves in particular were shaken. Pastor Brown arrived with news from his jail ministry in the afternoon. This time, Rattler is different in custody. Requested counseling. Wants to know where he went wrong. At the farm, Samuel discovered Ghost gazing at his former gang colors. "Considering the past. Considering the future," Ghost answered. "The VA hospital called me. They seek my assistance with their outreach initiative. It's possible that ex-gang members will pay attention to someone who has been in their shoes." Unexpected means were spreading the transformation. Stryker and Frank collaborated to develop security systems that provided protection without being intimidating once Stryker realized he had a knack for design. Dr. Martinez was asked about medical training by 2 former Iron Wolves. Tommy was even demonstrating to younger children that change was possible. However, success also brought with it new difficulties. Deputy Mitchell reported that other gangs were observing and assessing. She clarified that some people find hope in our actions. Others look for weaknesses to take advantage of. If we want to assist other towns, we will need a better method. Samuel met with his core group in what is now a training center, the basement of the church. Tank, Stryker, Ghost, and Axel had all developed into natural leaders, each contributing unique skills to their growing program. Copper Canyon made a call. Axel was reported. 15 members of the gang want to change. Need our assistance in establishing a program. Pine Ridge as well, Ghost said. Their sheriff inquired about our techniques of instruction. Samuel looked at the maps they had laid out on the tables, indicating possible locations for growth. We must exercise caution. Do this correctly. Everything we've built could be destroyed by one failure. Nora Harper came bearing coffee and sage advice. You guys have too narrow a mind. It's no longer only about rehabilitation. It's about preventing folks from losing their way by letting them know that there is another way. Preliminary proposals for a more structured program were presented by Dr. Martinez. The VA is providing assistance. Wish to use our achievements as a template for the rehabilitation of veterans across the country. Jim Parker was eating supper with the same men who had previously shattered his hand as the sun was sinking outside. He told Samuel, "I never thought I'd say this, but they're the best workers I've ever had. They utilized a search for security flaws, so be aware of them all." However, the night served as a reminder that they still had work to do. In search of safety, 3 ex-gang members from 2 counties over arrived in a truck. Their spokesperson claimed to have heard what transpired with Rattler. Heard that there was an alternative. Samuel observed his changed soldiers greet the newcomers with compassion rather than mistrust. They understood the bravery required to choose change because they had been in these men's shoes. As he assisted the newcomers in settling in, Ghost noted, "This is just the beginning. Every man who transforms becomes evidence that it is feasible." Samuel later discovered Tank patrolling the perimeter as the farm became accustomed to nighttime rituals. One of their most devoted guardians was the former enforcer. "What's the true miracle, you know?" Tank inquired. "That someone thought we could change, but not that we did." Samuel nodded while observing the distant glimmer of Ironwood Bluff's lights. The fact that the village, which had previously feared these guys, now welcomed them as protectors is evidence that the transformational power of the human spirit is limitless. Deputy Mitchell made her last patrol as darkness drew near, observing how erstwhile adversaries now cooperated to protect their neighborhood. She informed Samuel that it is no longer only about redemption. It has to do with evolution. These men are changed, not merely reformed. Ironwood Bluff was enveloped in darkness, yet the changes were still spreading. Word was getting out in other communities and towns. How many lives would be changed by the endeavor was the question, not if their achievement could be repeated. Tension was high at the Copper Canyon Community Center as Ghost spoke to their first group of recruits from outside the area. 20 ex-gang members, recently recruited from 3 distinct groups, observed with a mix of hope and suspicion. Letting his converted warriors lead the way, Samuel watched from the rear. Ghost started by saying, "The first thing you must realize is that this isn't about deleting who you were. The goal is to become the person you were destined to be." One of the old Iron Wolves rose, contesting his position. "It's easy for you to say. You were welcomed in your town. We continue to be viewed as threats by our people." Tank moved forward as they noticed us that way as well. For good reason. They were afraid of us. We are now gaining their confidence. Significant difference. Replicating Ironwood Bluff's success other towns without its shared history was the meeting's main focus. Although Dr. Martinez had created a structured training curriculum, in practice, theory was met with brutal reality. Later that same day, Axel reported, "We have problems in Pine Ridge. Owners of local businesses are declining to take part. You can't hold them responsible. They were robbed 6 months ago by these same men." They had set up a situation board in the converted barn on the farm, and Samuel looked at it. Programs for rehabilitation had begun in 5 villages, each with its own set of difficulties. "Show me," he said. Axel cited reports of incidents. Despite the lack of community support, their sheriff is supportive. "We're not changing these guys, we're just storing them." Deputy Mitchell showed up with the latest information from law enforcement sources. "We have 3 additional communities asking for programs, but there is opposition as well. We are perceived by some as being too lenient toward offenders." A crisis struck in the afternoon. In Copper Canyon, 2 program participants got into a brawl with some local teenagers. Despite their moderation and avoidance of violence, the episode had the potential to undermine community support. Ghost took care of things, transforming a possible catastrophe into a chance. He brought the 2 groups together and related his personal metamorphosis. I would have used violence to resolve this a year ago. We solve it with comprehension today. The teens took an interest in the program, which surprised everyone. Have you guys changed all that much? Someone inquired. As in, really? Ghost invites you to come see for yourself. Here, we're constructing something. More hands are always needed. Samuel discovered Stryker instructing new recruits on property upkeep back in Ironwood Bluff. The young man had found a gift for teaching, decomposing difficult concepts into digestible chunks. Stryker clarified, it's not just about fixing things. It's about accepting accountability. Every repair is an opportunity to demonstrate that we have changed. When they were creating training procedures, Nora Harper's practical knowledge was really helpful. You can't count on every town to embrace them, she said. One cup of coffee at a time, trust is developed. Their first significant breakthrough came in the evening. Legitimate companies took notice of Frank Turner's security system design, which he created with rehabilitated authors. He said that he received bids to install in 3 shopping complexes. They remarked that no one knows security better than previous burglars, thus they want our guys to undertake the work. Samuel observed his changed fighter's take on every obstacle. Ghost was ideal for first outreach because of his innate sensitivity. Training was organized in part by Axel's military discipline. Tank's knowledge of gang psychology was essential in averting confrontations. Dr. Martinez noted that we are no longer only altering lives. Going over progress reports. We are transforming communities. Every accomplishment increases the likelihood of the following one. Unexpected news arrived via a call from Pine Ridge late at night. The owners of the businesses that had opposed their program had seen 2 ex-gang members stop a robbery attempt. Sheriff Langston reported that no violence was used. They simply talked the kids down and stood their stance. Actually, the same kids who used to work for them. The business association is currently looking for ways to assist. Samuel assembled his core staff in the farm's meeting room, which is now their operations center. This is a pivotal moment, he said. I can no longer manage this expansion by myself. Don't have to, said Ghost. Every achievement produces new leaders. Men who have been there before can mentor others. Axel distributed its most recent training materials. We've determined the essential components. Participation in the community, skill improvement, and psychological assistance. However, the most crucial component cannot be taught. Hope, Tank completed, demonstrating to them that change is achievable since we succeeded. Samuel discovered Nora on his doorstep, her ubiquitous coffee pot ready, as midnight drew near. She whispered, Catherine would be proud. Not only of what you've created, but also of how you're enabling others to do so. Even though darkness had fallen on the property, things were still going on in the converted barn. There were new leaders in the making. Men who had ruined communities in the past. Learning how to rebuild them now. Every obstacle they encountered and every fix they came up with contributed to an expanding transformational blueprint. Do you know what I discovered? As they went over the day's reports, Ghost asked Samuel. We are no longer only rehabilitating individuals. Communities are being healed by us. Dozens of lives are impacted by one altered life. In the distance, Ironwood Bluff's lights were glowing. A ray of hope for the future. The ability for change to occur was not the true miracle. It was that once change began, it had a force of its own. With an unusually heavy thud, the morning newspaper fell onto Samuel's porch. The reason was obvious from the headline. The authenticity of repentant gang members' commercial endeavors is questioned by security firms. A few minutes later, Sheriff Langston showed up with a worried expression. Pressure is being applied to state licensing boards. Blackhawk Security formally complained about the contracts in our program. Axles displayed their most recent security project designs within the farm's operations center. Because they valued their distinct perspectives on loss prevention, major shops had been engaging their reformed members for security advice. Ghost clarified that their claims were not appropriately licensed. Examining the grievance. Say we should not be hired for security work because of our past records. Samuel looked over the papers. Regarding licensing, they are not incorrect. We must accomplish things correctly. Deputy Mitchell showed up with further information. Today is the Chamber of Commerce meeting. The CEO of Blackhawk is criticizing our initiative and claiming that it poses a risk to public safety. Their core staff came together for the crisis meeting in the morning. The situation was outlined by Frank Turner, whose hardware store had turned into their official front. We have 23 contracts in 5 counties, he said. Providing reformed members with respectable careers. Blackhawk wants everything to stop. Unexpected insight arrived with Nora Harper. Do you recall my farmer's market being disrupted by the general store? The same thing. Well-established companies are afraid of change. This challenge, however, was unique. Blackhawk Security was a well-funded, politically connected resistance group. They had engaged a well-known legal company to contest the legitimacy of the scheme. Samuel discovered Ghost instructing new recruits in appropriate security protocols. We do this correctly, Ghost said. Every form was submitted, and every rule was adhered to. No shortcuts. The Chamber of Commerce meeting took place in the afternoon. Richard Sterling, the CEO of Blackhawk, presented a stark image of peril. Sterling said, "These folks are criminals. Rehabilitation won't change it. It would be like assigning foxes to run hen houses if you put them in charge of security." Tank got to his feet and spoke steadily. "I would have agreed with you a year ago, but let me to demonstrate." On the screen, he displayed security statistics. Theft rates in participating firms have decreased by 60% since the program's inception. We comprehend security because we are aware of all potential hazards. Jim Parker spoke to the chamber while his damaged hand was now healed. When professional security firms attempted to quadruple their charges, these men defended my market. They do more than merely guard, they stop issues before they arise. Clinical data was presented by Dr. Martinez. The success rate of our program is unheard of. These men are changing their communities, not just being reformed. Sterling, however, had more ammunition. They are leveraging their gang connections to undercut respectable companies. Axel, standing in his immaculately ironed business suit, interrupted. We are successful because we have a comprehensive understanding of security. Community above conflict, prevention over response. As the argument continued, an unexpected development occurred. Local company owners began to tell tales. How nonviolent robberies were prevented by reformed members. How community relations were enhanced by their security consulting. Samuel observed how his changed soldiers met the task with professionalism, demonstrating their transformation with deeds rather than words. Deputy Mitchell brought news from the state capitol to the farm later. A special hearing was called by licensing boards. Every one of our contracts is being examined. Well, she was surprised by Samuel. It's time to demonstrate our specific methods to them. There was a lot of preparation over the next 3 days. Axel and Ghost collected records of their workout regimens. Frank arranged their company documents. Dr. Martinez prepared proof of their successful recovery. They believe they will discover corruption, quick corners, and tank observations. They will discover professionalism instead. As Samuel's team made their case, the hearing chamber went quiet. All licenses were obtained legally. Every rule was adhered to. Their training program went above and beyond what the state required. Samuel informed the board that these men's past isn't helping them prosper. The lessons they learned from it are helping them prosper. Those who are aware of the causes of crime are the best people to prevent it. Sterling's attorneys put a lot of pressure on him, searching for flaws. Rather, they discovered a software that was so well documented that it served as a template for others. Your background investigations? The chairman of the board inquired. Axel retorted, tougher than industry standard. We still have more to prove. On the last day of the hearing, the board made its verdict as the sun was setting. In addition to being able to continue, the program would be suggested as a model for rehabilitation through legal business development. Samuel discovered Ghost instructing new security squads back in Ironwood Bluff. Ghost mentioned that Sterling offered to buy us out. Claimed that we may set our own price. And we're not for sale, I told him. Certain things are more important than money. As Samuel went over their most recent expansion plans, night fell over the property. They had not been weakened by opposition. It had made them stronger, more respectable, and more professional. Do you know what irritates them the most? Bringing her evening coffee, Nora inquired. Not that you're failing, but that you're doing well. Demonstrating the possibility of transformation. Axel revised their training manuals in the operations center. They became better, more thorough, and more professional with each task. They weren't merely demonstrating their worth. They were establishing norms that others would have to adhere to. As Deputy Mitchell watched new recruits review security laws, he said, "Never thought I'd say this. However, the greatest miracles can occasionally be found in the paperwork." As they got ready for the trials of tomorrow, the lights burned late. However, they now confront them as respectable professionals who also happen to possess special knowledge of their specialty, rather than as repentant criminals. The hardest conflicts are sometimes won with paperwork and resolve rather than fists or firearms. And sometimes the biggest triumphs come from disproving opponents by indisputable success rather than from winning. Beyond his customary morning visit, Pastor Brown's arrival at the farm carried significance. He was carrying a letter. When he discovered Samuel inspecting the wheat fields, his face was concerned. He held out the letter and said simply, "It's from Rattler. He says he wants to make atonement and has started attending my jail ministry." The word spread like wildfire among the reformed horsemen. Opinions were fiercely divided at the operations center, which is now a center for legitimate security business. Tank argued, his voice harsh, "He tried to kill us, smashed Jim's hand, set businesses on fire, and threatened our families. You can't forgive everything." Ghost looked thoughtfully at the security records on his desk. "Everybody done something they're not proud of." "You mean programs about second chances?" "Another type of chance," Axel retorted. "He led us into the night. He purposefully led us there." In the barn, which is now a training facility, Samuel assembled his core group. On the table between them was an unopened letter. In attendance, Deputy Mitchell represented the interests of law enforcement. According to a prison psychiatrist, his transformation seemed sincere, she said. Been assisting with investigations and assisting in the closure of narcotics routes that he once controlled. Rattler's psychological exams were assessed by Dr. Martinez. A classic example of a wounded warrior. Lost himself, his family, and his unit. Acquired authority and dominance over others. Ghost murmured softly, "Just like us. Same story, different scale." The local council heard the argument. First to speak was Jim Parker, whose shattered hand had fully healed. Who receives the chance cannot be chosen if we believe in redemption. However, we have power over how that opportunity is presented. While pouring coffee to both Rattler's friends and detractors, Samuel discovered Nora Harper at her diner. How would Catherine respond? Softly, she asked him. Samuel retorted, "She would say that the most difficult tests of our principles occur when they are most uncomfortable." Transformation had been the cornerstone of the program's success. On demonstrating that change was feasible. However, Rattler stood for their worst fears and recollections. Stryker provided a younger viewpoint when assisting new hires at the hardware store. We decided to follow him, therefore he was our leader. Perhaps we should give him the opportunity to make a better decision as well. The choice has to be made immediately. In 6 months, Rattler would be eligible for supervised release. Addressing this on their terms now is preferable to responding later. At last, Samuel unfolded the letter. When Rattler's statements were shorn of their typical bluster, they were frank. He described seeing his unit perish in Iraq in his writing. About being violent and losing himself. About watching his former men use the ashes of his destruction to create something constructive. He wrote, "I don't deserve forgiveness. However, I'd like to know how you got back. How you used all that suffering to create something tangible." At the farm, Ghost called a special gathering. Each repentant writer who had worked for Rattler was given an opportunity to speak. A complicated image of a man who had lost his way and led others down with him was shown in their accounts. At last, Tank stated, "Here's the thing. Rattler is not the only thing we're debating. We are determining our true selves. Our true beliefs regarding change." Dr. Martinez suggested a methodical strategy. "We begin with visits under supervision. He works with the members that have the most experience. Progressively proves himself. No shortcuts. No preferential treatment." Samuel observed his reformed troops grapple with their most difficult task to date. Instead of destroying, they had learned to defend. To construct rather than destroy. Their values were now put to the ultimate test. He reminded them of programs based on the idea that everyone can change. The question is, do we actually think so? Though not unanimous, the choice was obvious. They would give Rattler the same opportunity that they had received. But within very specific guidelines. The bottom would be where he would begin. Gain trust by doing things. Show that his shift was genuine. Deputy Mitchell contributed to the security protocols drafting. One mistake. He took a step back toward his previous behavior. He's finished. No second chances. Samuel discovered Ghost in the market square as night fell. Observing the community protection training of new recruits. Ghost noted that not altering oneself is the most difficult aspect of transition. It's the conviction that people can also change. There had previously been external dangers to the program. Rival gangs. Authorities who are skeptical. Rivals in business. However, this challenge originated internally. Testing their fundamental beliefs as well as their processes. Supporters and skeptics alike attended Pastor Brown's evening prayer meeting. He reminded them that redemption is not about merit. It's about making a better decision. Even if it's the most difficult path. Samuel strolled around the edge of his property. Recalling how Rattler had led 30 bikers against them that evening. The same men who had formerly terrorized the community now guarded it. What other miracles might there be if that one could happen? Nora brought him her evening coffee and informed him that Catherine used to say that the real test of principles isn't when they're simple. We have to pay for them in order to maintain them. Ironwood Bluff was enveloped in darkness. But the silent process of change persisted. They would start organizing Rattler's integration tomorrow. Establishing requirements for him to fulfill. Preparing their hearts and their program for the most difficult change they have ever experienced. The greatest trials of redemption can perhaps be found in finding the strength to transform adversaries into something better rather than in confronting them. As the jail transport arrived, the property was covered in lengthy shadows from the morning sun. Shackled and accompanied by 2 guards, Rattler came out. Without his gang emblem and leather cuts, he somehow looked smaller. Samuel observed the responses of his changed warrior. Tank's shoulders are tense. The cautious neutrality of Ghost. The military evaluation of Axel. Samuel, going by Rattler's given name, walked forward as Marcus Mitchell. Greetings on this first day. You will be directly supervised while working. You're done if you break any rules or show any signs of your prior behavior. You get it? Rattler gave a nod. Something new took the place of his typical haughtiness. Uncertainty. I get it. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. The schedule for the day had been meticulously prepared. Arduous physical work while Axel was watching. Intended to assess attitude as well as compliance. The wheat fields were their first stop. Manual labor that called for humility and concentration. Axel, who was used to giving commands, watched Rattler struggle with simple farming chores. How do you feel about taking them? It feels like a fresh start, Rattler said, dabbing at his perspiration. That might be what I need. Deputy Mitchell kept a low profile while recording everything. The program's future with comparable high-risk rehabilitations may depend on how well Rattler works out. The town was abuzz with news of Rattler's arrival by mid-morning. The farm was reached by Jim Parker. His presence attracted notice right away. He saw his erstwhile tormentor as he worked in the fields. He whispered to Samuel, "I never thought I'd see this. The one who ordered the breaking of my hand. Learning to cultivate rather than destroy." Ghost was in charge of the lunch break. Keeping a close eye on how Rattler interacts with other rehabilitated riders. If old hierarchies are not controlled, they may dangerously reappear. Strange, Ghost subsequently said to Samuel. In some ways, he seems more human when you see him struggle with everyday tasks. Rattler faced his first serious test in the afternoon. A delivery vehicle from their business rivals, Blackhawk Security, pulled up. Recognizing Rattler, the driver said something inflammatory. He sneered, "Look who's playing farmer." Dirt digger turned big evil gang leader. Samuel kept a close eye on everything, but everyone was taken aback by Rattler's reaction. Quietly, he answered, "I'm just trying to grow something good for a change," and went back to work. From her makeshift office in the barn, Dr. Martinez watched the exchange. "That's real," she said. Violence would have been old Rattler's response. He's learning to control his impulses. There was tension when Nora Harper arrived with afternoon coffee. Although she had been one of Rattler's most outspoken critics, her reaction showed how adaptable the community could be. She merely offered him a cup and stated, "You can't work fields without proper hydration. You need coffee, even if you're looking for salvation." As the day went on, little things became more significant. Tank observed Rattler being very kind to the baby plants. Ghost saw that he listened more than he spoke. Axel stated that he was willing to accept training and correction. During the nightly security check, Stryker informed Samuel that he was different. Something has changed within him, not simply the way he acts. When one of the more recent program participants lost control of a tractor and almost caused an accident, it was the most eye-opening moment. Rattler responded right away, assisting Axel's authority in stabilizing the situation without assuming leadership. "Well done," Samuel said afterwards. "But why didn't you take the initiative there, I wonder? You were more seasoned." "No longer my place," Rattler said. "In prison, I had to learn that. Knowing when to follow is sometimes a necessary part of leadership." Sheriff Langston showed up as dusk was falling to see how the day was going. "Reports are good," he informed Samuel. "However, there are still some anxious people around town. According to Samuel, they ought to be. It's appropriate to exercise caution. Blind trust is not what we seek. We're establishing earned confidence." The core crew came together for the evening debrief. Rattler's interactions with other people were reported by Ghost. Tank described his performance at work. Axel assessed his attitude toward authority. "He's attempting," Ghost said. "Attempting so hard. I wonder if he can keep it up." Dr. Martinez discussed her observations as a professional. "The shift appears sincere, but it's usually simpler in the beginning. Time and strain are the true tests." Rattler asked to speak to the group before the transport left. There was none of his old manipulation in his statements. "I know that saying sorry won't make things better," he remarked. I can't take anything back. However, I was awakened by seeing you all create something positive. I believed something died with my battalion in Iraq. A complicated range of emotions was left behind when the transport left. Caution tempers hope. Experience checks for optimism. Unaltered by their usual coffee ritual, Samuel discovered Nora on his porch. Everyone deserves a chance to grow, Catherine thought. However, she would also add that certain plants require more cautious maintenance. Even though night had fallen on the farm, transformation was still quietly at work. There would be additional tests and fresh problems tomorrow. Additional chances for success and failure. The most severe wounds frequently resulted in the most difficult changes. The greatest miracles of salvation can occasionally be found in small decisions rather than big events. Selecting development above devastation. Humility as opposed to authority. Hope instead of fear. If you are patient and wise, you can bring fresh life to even the most difficult terrain. When Samuel received Deputy Mitchell's urgent call, it was still early in the morning. Communications had been intercepted by prison intelligence. Older people from Rattler's close circle were trying to get in touch with him through clandestine means. Ghost reported finding these while out in the field yesterday, revealing to Samuel concealed messages concealed among equipment deliveries. Once more, they are offering him power. An opportunity to use our program to rebuild his empire. In the darkness before dawn, Samuel assembled his core squad. Stryker, Tank, Ghost, and Axel had repeatedly shown their worth, but this test went right to the core of their program. Shall we tell him? Tank inquired, the tension of competing allegiances visible on his face. Or hold out to see how he responds to the temptation. Sheriff Langston showed up with more unsettling information. State Police informed me. In Copper Canyon, 3 of Rattler's former lieutenants were seen. They are testing our perimeter in an effort to find any vulnerabilities. The security briefing in the morning was especially important. Unaware that they knew, Rattler stood in front of them, updating them on his progress from the day before. Samuel kept a close eye on him, searching for traces of the previous manipulation. Rattler pointed to crop plans and explained that field rotation was proceeding nicely. Do you think we can increase irrigation efficiency by making the following changes? Have some guests in town. Casually, Samuel interrupted. Are you old friends? Do you want to discuss these with me? Rattler's face lost its redness. The old mask briefly came off, revealing real dread. When did they show up? Marcus, that's not a response. He seemed more centered when his real name was spoken. They have been attempting to get in touch with me via delivery services here and jail food employees. I have been ignoring them, that's what. As she watched the exchange, Dr. Martinez took note of his body language. She said to Deputy Mitchell in a whisper, he's telling the truth. Take a look at his hands. Keeping eye contact and avoiding defensive motions. How come you didn't report it? Axel made a demand. Rattler said, shame, as if the phrase had cost him. I wanted to demonstrate that I could do things on my own. Show that I was no longer that person. I was mistaken. Ought to have come forward. There was more security as the day went on. Surveillance vehicles were observed by Ghost's crew close to the farm. Tank recognized the ancient gang signs that were used to identify delivery trucks. The net was getting tighter. Nora Harper's presence during lunch brought a surprising revelation. At the diner, she said, some people were asking questions. Attempting to pick up Rattler's habits. Told them that these days, all he does is work and study. Their disappointment should have been evident. In the distant field, Samuel discovered Rattler working by himself. His body language conveyed the frustration he was unable to express. Rattler muttered, they won't stop, without raising his gaze. Not until they make me make a decision. Power is a compulsive behavior. They believe they can entice me once more. Are they able to? On the irrigation pipe, Rattler's hands froze. Perhaps 2 months ago. Now, however, he pointed to the crops that were growing all around them. It's the first time in years that I'm creating something rather than destroying. You can't return to that void. A crisis struck in the afternoon. During a delivery of supplies, Rattler was approached by one of his former lieutenants. Ghost and Samuel observed from hiding places, trying to gauge his reaction. "Master?" The lieutenant's voice was quick and low. "Everything is in its proper place. Give us a word, and we'll take charge. These farmers won't be aware of what happened to them." Rattler's reaction was prompt and decisive. "The door on your way out is the only thing that hits anyone. I'm no longer your boss. Do not wish to be. You're weak because of them." Rattler interrupted him. "I've seen their true might. The construction kind. Now get out of here before I make my own security call." Local media learned about the altercation. By nightfall, journalists gathered at the farm's entrance, debating the viability of rehabilitating dangerous criminals. Deputy Mitchell was looking over surveillance footage when Samuel found him. She noticed that he did everything correctly. Complied with procedures, upheld limits, and reported the interaction right away. Samuel retorted that sometimes the greatest triumphs appear to be minor decisions. The difficult question was later brought up by Axel during the evening debrief. What happens if they continue? What happens if they press endlessly until something breaks? Then we demonstrate which is more powerful, Ghost replied. Our dedication to building, or their urge to destroy. The assessment by Dr. Martinez offered a professional viewpoint. In fact, today made his recovery stronger. Real growth is recognizing temptation and resisting it. Samuel discovered Rattler making a final check of the irrigation lines as night fell over the farm. Instead of being calculated, the former gang leader's hands moved with compassion. Silently, Rattler muttered, "They'll try again. Continue to press until they compel a confrontation." Samuel probably agreed. When they do, the question is, who will they find? Rattler answered, not who they expect, with fresh conviction in his voice. Not the person I was before. There was no calm in the blackness of the night. Forces assembled somewhere, trying to find vulnerability in test determination. But transformation went on quietly within the confines of the farm. What's actually changing, do you know? During their evening coffee ritual, Nora inquired. We all, not just him. Realizing that redemption is worth striving for, not simply a possibility. The hardest fights are sometimes fought with everyday decisions rather than fists or firearms. For every minor choice, choose right over easy. Growth is more important than power. Constructing on top of devastation. In the struggle for change, these were the true triumphs. As Ghost's morning patrol noticed the first indications of disaster, storm clouds began to amass over Ironwood Bluff. 20 motorcycles on the town's edge. Their motorcyclists are dressed in Rattler's Inner Circle's vintage colors. There would be more. Using his military experience to understand the tactical situation, Axel observed, they're moving into position. 3 groups, a coordinated strategy. They're organized, not just gang members. Rattler was already researching approach routes at the farm's operations center when Samuel arrived. Samuel said, your old tactical officer. He's guiding them, isn't he, Jackson? Rattler gave him a stern nod, recognizing his habit. We were all trained by him. Believes he is aware of every move we will make. Deputy Mitchell and Sheriff Langston showed up with county line reports. They're serious this time, 40 additional bikes are on the way. Samuel assembled his core squad as the early sun peeked through the clouds. Tank, Striker, Ghost, and Axel had all shown their worth time and time again. They were now put to the ultimate test. According to Samuel, they anticipate bloodshed. We'll fight fire with fire, so expect that. We are no longer that person. Everyone's concern was expressed by Dr. Martinez. These are not your typical males. They firmly believe in Rattler's traditional methods. It will be difficult to argue with them. Rattler said, then we show them something they've never seen: actual strength. The kind that doesn't break, but builds. The town mobilized with efficiency that had been practiced. The security mechanisms of Frank Turner came into action. In order to provide a safe haven, Pastor Brown opened the church basement. Nora Harper turned her cafe into a hub for collaboration. By midday, the town was encircled by 60 bikers. Jackson, their leader, came alone to the market square, a stern, military-looking man. He yelled out, "Marcus. It's time to give up being a farmer. They're here to bring you home, your actual family." Rattler moved forward, but he wasn't by himself. He was joined by Samuel and the reformed horsemen, who displayed solidarity rather than hostility. "I'm at home, Jack," said Rattler. "Now, this is my family. The authentic one. The one who constructs things." Jackson's expression grew stern. "You're weak because of them. Take a look at yourself. Fields of work, obeying directives. You're not this person." Rattler said no. "I'm a superior person. Someone I should have been from the beginning." When more bikes arrived, the strain increased. However, something unexpected was taking place. The reformed cyclists were not defending themselves. Rather, they carried on with their work. Caring for crops, fixing structures, and defending their neighborhood with presence rather than coercion. "Last chance," Jackson cautioned. "We will either burn it all down or come gladly." Samuel took a step forward. "As if you destroyed your own life, Jack. Following Baghdad? Are you lost? Have you lost your purpose? You couldn't face creating something new, so you found power and destruction." Jackson's calmness wavered a little. "How did you?" "In the same manner, I am aware of the guilt, the nightmares, and the need to have control over everything because you had no control over what happened to your unit." The realization struck like a punch to the body. Some of Jackson's riders shifted uneasily behind him. Rattler advised you to look about. "Look, really. You say these men are weak. We've never been stronger than they are. Able to confront their issues with strength. Robust enough to construct anything tangible." Ghost came slowly, hands outstretched. "Jack, do you recall what you taught us? About safeguarding what is important. Right now, we're doing that. Simply put, in a different way." The riders who had changed started to tell their tales. How they had discovered protection and meaning rather than devastation. How they had helped others rebuild their lives in order to rebuild their own. Tank's voice echoed around the plaza. "Jack, you taught us to be warriors. We are still. Only now, we're fighting new conflicts." As Jackson clearly fought with his decisions, the afternoon sun peeked through the clouds. More bikers were listening behind him as they watched their erstwhile brothers change into something different. Samuel urged them to show them. Show them the true meaning of strength. What transpired over the next few hours was unexpected. There was dialogue instead of violence. They discovered possibilities rather than devastation. As they escorted their former brethren through the town, the rehabilitated horsemen demonstrated what they had become and what they had built. As expected, Nora Harper began serving coffee to her old adversaries. "I can't think clearly when I'm hungry," she said. Jackson's steely veneer cracked as he stood in the market square at nightfall. He said, "I thought I was making you stronger all these years. I simply passed on my own darkness instead." Rattler said, "Then help us build something better." "I was aided by these people." As cyclists started to depart, not in defeat but in reflection, the night descended upon Ironwood Bluff. Jackson was one of 10 bikers that stayed to inquire about the rehabilitation program. From the porch of the property, Samuel discovered Rattler observing the departures. Isn't it a harder battle than the physical ones? He inquired. Much more difficult, Rattler said. It's worth it to fight against who you once were. After reflecting on the day's events, Dr. Martinez recognized a deeper significance. Instead of finding warriors to battle, they discovered builders. That's the true triumph. Ghost took one further step to secure the perimeter of the farm as midnight drew near. What did you think won today? Not our strategies, not our defense preparations. The obvious fact that things can change. As Ironwood Bluff calmed down once more, the stars came out. However, there was something more powerful present in this tranquility than merely the lack of violence. Once more, the transformational power had been demonstrated. Transforming possible adversaries into those who could be saved. Helping opponents find their way home can sometimes result in greater wins than conquering them. Months ago, the headline of the morning paper revealed a story that few could have predicted. The Ironwood Bluff rehab model expands nationwide. As Ghost and Axel got ready for their first training session with representatives from 5 other states, Samuel went over the article. Organizing presentation materials, Ghost acknowledged that it still felt weird. Instructing people on how to accomplish tasks that we ourselves hardly understood. A nationwide coordination center had developed from the farm's operations center. Potential program locations across the nation were marked on the maps that covered the walls. Major rehabilitation institutes had taken notice of Dr. Martinez's clinical results. Deputy Mitchell stated that Sacramento called again, bringing in the morning briefing. The head of their police department wants to know how quickly we can assist with program setup. Received comparable requests from Atlanta and Houston. 3 weeks into his own metamorphosis, Jackson collaborated with Tank to create training guidelines. His experience in the military helped to organize the growing program. Jackson told a group of visiting law enforcement officers that upholding standards is crucial. You need to grasp the fundamentals, you can't merely duplicate the surface. Rattler gave Samuel information as he observed fresh recruits working the crops. I once believed that the number of people who feared you was the measure of authority. I now realize that true power is in the number of individuals you can change. A group from the state capitol arrived in the afternoon. Axel and Ghost led a tour of the facility for lawmakers interested in supporting similar programs throughout the state. Samuel told them to show them everything. Achievements and failures. They must realize that this is not an easy solution. For visiting program directors, Nora Harper's Diner had evolved into an informal welcome hub. She served coffee to representatives from 3 separate cities and argued that they couldn't start new lives on empty bellies. Training facilities in nearby states were now part of Frank Turner's security company. He told prospective clients that the finest teachers are reformed members. They are aware of both sides of the problem. There was a special gathering that evening. The first group of program graduates, who are now getting ready to run their own rehabilitation facilities, met with Samuel, core team. Remember what Samuel said, you're not merely imparting knowledge, you're demonstrating to them that change is achievable because you've experienced it yourself. Dr. Martinez provided the most recent success data. 87% of the individuals were able to recover. No other program, anywhere, has ever done that before. However, success also brought with it new difficulties. Sheriff Langston expressed worries about upholding standards as they grew. Our standards cannot be compromised by growth. Stryker found an unexpected reality while collaborating with newer members. According to him, every place must figure things out on its own. Ironwood Bluff cannot simply be replicated, local soil must be used for growth. Samuel discovered Jackson going over security procedures for new facilities as night fell. What he would have destroyed, the former tactical officer now found meaning in preserving. Jackson said, I never thought I'd say this, but it takes more skill to teach men to build than to teach them to fight. Another difficulty was brought to light by Ghost's nighttime report. Without knowing the basics, other organizations are attempting to imitate us. making programs that lack the fundamental ideas yet have a comparable appearance. Axel set up the supplies for the following day's session in the farm's conference room, which was now used as a training facility. He noted, "We're not just teaching rehabilitation. We are imparting hope." Rattler had also found a new function as a result of the expansion. His understanding of gang psychology was helpful in interacting with recalcitrant members. He informed incoming recruits, "I had to learn it all wrong before I could help others learn it right." Deputy Mitchell noticed the wider picture while assessing petitions from other jurisdictions. Not only is this altering people, but it is also altering the way society views atonement. Samuel took a final stroll around his land as midnight drew near. Beyond its borders, the farm had expanded to represent what could happen when people opted for change rather than ruin. Nora discovered him carrying his typical nightly cup of coffee on his doorstep. "Catherine would be in awe," she muttered. "Not only at what you created, but also at its scope." Over Ironwood Bluff, the stars came out, but the light of change was extending well beyond their little community. Change seeds were sprouting in other cities and villages. "You know what's important?" During the last security check, Ghost inquired. "Not the number of programs we develop, but the number of lives we change. Every individual who transforms serves as evidence that anyone may." Even when the night descended on the farm, its might grew. The question was how many more lives would be changed in the attempt to replicate their miracle, not if it could be done. As Samuel walked his usual patrol route, the wheat fields of Ironwood Bluff were tinted gold by the fall sunlight. 25 years as a Texas Ranger, another lifetime of assisting men in their quest for atonement. Another metamorphosis was now necessary. Already sensing what was about to happen, Ghost located him beside the irrigation lines. "You intend to back off, don't you? Programs have expanded beyond the direction of a single man," Samuel said. "The next generation should take the lead." As Samuel assembled his core staff, the morning meeting took on additional significance. Tank, Stryker, Ghost, and Axel had transformed from ex-gang members into well-respected local leaders. Rattler and Jackson, too, had identified their roles in the future of the program. Samuel started, "I've been thinking about Catherine lately. True strength, according to her, is in understanding when to pass on power rather than in clinging to it." Dr. Martinez brought extensive program data with him. 3 states and 6 successful centers. Next month, 4 more will be released. "Samuel, the model works. It is steady." Law enforcement viewpoints were shared by Deputy Mitchell, who was promoted to sheriff upon Robert's retirement. Participating towns saw a 60% decrease in crime rates. "You've produced a successful product." A group of program graduates gathered in the afternoon. Communities were now safeguarded by men who had previously threatened them. Others are motivated to alter by their metamorphoses. "Do you recall the night we stormed this farm for the first time?" Tank questioned the group. "Believed that we were really strong. Before we learned to build rather than destroy, we had no idea what true power was." Memories began when Nora Harper arrived with coffee. "I served these men for the first time," she remembered. "In the barn, they were zip-tied. Take a peek at them now. Pillars of the neighborhood." Axel showed the plan of transition he and Ghost had created. Each center is self-sufficient and run by successful graduates. Like branches from the same root, they are connected but separate. Rattler and Samuel strolled around the grounds. Their convoluted past became something neither of them could have predicted. Rattler said, "I used to think you were my enemy. I get it now. We all needed a father figure like you." There was a special meal at the farm that evening. To hear Samuel's decision, community leaders, program graduates, and original team members assembled. Samuel told them, "This program was never about me. The goal was to demonstrate that change is achievable. Day after day, every one of you has demonstrated that." Ghost got up to talk, his voice full with intensity. You showed us that devastation does not equal strength. It lies in having the guts to start over, change, and guide others. Once a tactical officer who had led troops to violence, Jackson now guided them toward repentance. The future of the program is secure, he told Samuel. The mission is now clear to us. Know it well. Samuel discovered Deputy Mitchell going over security procedures she had assisted in creating as night fell. She noted that the town had changed. The entire region is unique. These heroes do more than just keep us safe. They motivate people to make changes. When Frank Turner arrived, he brought architectural ideas for the development of the program. He informed the group that the next phase was ready whenever they were. Based on the framework you established. Nora and Samuel were enjoying their customary cup of coffee on his porch in the stillness of the evening. Softly, she said, Catherine would be very proud. Not only of what you created, but also of how you're allowing it to flourish outside of you. As Samuel went on his last nighttime patrol, the stars came out. Every step brought back memories of struggles waged, lives changed, and communities restored. Do you know what I discovered? Ghost joined him in asking. A legend was never needed by the program. A farmer was required. Someone who recognized that change need the proper environment to flourish, just like crops do. Stryker showed the new hires how far they had come while working late. He told them that he used to believe that strength was in inciting fear. The true power lies in inspiring optimism. Samuel discovered his core team waiting in the operations center as midnight drew near. They had begun as adversaries, developed into allies, and eventually became family. He informed them that the transition would be announced tomorrow. But I want you to know something tonight. The males we assisted did not undergo the biggest change. Finding out what we could become when we had faith in something greater than ourselves was the goal. Ironwood Bluff was enveloped in darkness, but transformation was still quietly at work. Samuel's approach had developed robust branches, deep roots, and a bountiful crop. Let someone take care of the garden now. Sometimes the best legacy comes from helping others develop rather than from holding on to what you have. As Samuel Hunter got ready for his last day as program director, dawn broke over Ironwood Bluff one last time. Like the hope of redemption he had assisted in planting in so many lives, the wheat fields he had maintained now stretched toward the horizon, full and golden. As program participants arrived from all over the nation, a variety of voices filled the early air. Tank, Stryker, Ghost, and Axel moved among them. Respected leaders who had demonstrated that transformation was not only possible but impossible replaced the gang members who had changed their ways. As she prepared breakfast and coffee for the assembling group, Nora Harper remarked, "It's strange how things come full circle. Our town was once threatened by these same men. They now defend communities in 3 states." As Dr. Martinez gave visiting officials the final figures, the farm's operations center was bustling with activity. Wherever the program spread, there were more than 500 successful rehabilitations, an overall success rate of 87%, and a decrease in crime. Jackson stood alongside Rattler, who is now a major instructor in their outreach program, going over training procedures. Jackson reflected, "I never imagined that we'd be teaching others how to leave the life. Back then, we believed ourselves to be fighters, but we had no idea what true strength was." Deputy Mitchell and Samuel had a peaceful moment together as they watched fresh recruits arrive for training. "Do you recall when I thought this was absurd? Farming to rehabilitate gang members? Look, we're transforming the national perspective on redemption." The official transfer ceremony took place in the afternoon. With his changed warriors arranged behind him like a brand new honor guard, Samuel stood in front of the assembled crowd. "He started when Catherine and I purchased this farm. She said something that stuck with me. Claimed that the land would inform us about its growth requirements. People are no different. All they require is the proper soil, proper care, and faith in their potential." Ghost moved forward and took the program's symbolic keys. He said to Samuel, You taught us that strength isn't in how many you can control. It's in the number of people you can change. As community members related tales of transformation, the service turned into a celebration. Jim Parker talked about forgiveness while holding his formerly broken hand in a firm position. Frank Turner described how his security company was transformed by reformed members. Pastor Brown talked about how it affected other communities. What actually changed, do you know? During his address, Tank posed the question. The entire concept of what is conceivable, not just us. Each man who undergoes transformation becomes a living example of how anyone may change. Samuel took his core staff for a final walk around his property as nightfall drew near. Every step was a memory. Communities are rebuilt, lives are transformed, and battles are fought. Do you recall that first evening? Axel inquired. When did we arrive to demolish this place? We're now safeguarding locations like it all throughout the nation. The striker was done. It's funny how life unfolds. All of the important characters in each story came together for the sunset gathering. A feast had been served by Nora Harper's diner. Families were enjoying their changed protectors in the town square, which had formerly been a battlefield. Samuel was located by the wheat fields by Rattler. He said, I used to think you were soft. Producing rather than consuming. I get it now. It takes more strength to grow than it did to demolish. Dr. Martinez presented her final evaluation. It's no longer just rehabilitation, she clarified. Evolution is what it is. These are not merely rehabilitated men. They are changed. They're also changing other people. Samuel headed to Catherine's favorite position on the porch as darkness fell. Nora joined him for their customary cup of coffee. Nora replied gently, she knew that more than wheat would be grown on this area. I had faith that you would discover a method to guide lost souls back to their homes. As Samuel assembled his changed warriors for the final time, the stars came out. This becomes your entire program tomorrow. However, keep in mind that it was never about me. The goal was to demonstrate that change is achievable. You are all live examples of that. Now prepared to take the lead, Ghost spoke on behalf of the gang. You showed us how to create rather than destroy. How to defend rather than intimidate. How to cultivate something greater than ourselves. Fires were lighted in the square, illuminating faces that had made their journey from darkness to dawn as night fell over Ironwood Bluff. Samuel saw his legacy materialize in the lives that were changed in front of him, not in structures or initiatives. What's the true miracle, you know? As he listened to program graduates, Deputy Mitchell questioned the new recruits. Their change is transforming others, not that they changed. For the final time, Samuel was by himself in his fields at midnight. Like waves on an infinite sea of possibilities, the wheat swayed gently in the breeze. The lights of Ironwood Bluff burned steadily and warmly behind him. New horizons were promised by the stars before him. The biggest changes occasionally result from quiet decisions to believe in something greater than ourselves rather than from major conflicts. That conviction had transformed adversaries into defenders, devastation into development, and anxiety into hope at Ironwood Bluff. Samuel could tell Catherine was grinning somewhere. Beyond their greatest expectations, her garden had flourished, producing a harvest of changed lives that would nourish future generations. 2 more amazing tales await you directly on your screen in the next section. You won't want to miss these if you like this one. Simply click to view, and remember to subscribe. A lot would be at stake.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.